Experts believe that Transport Minister Sibusiso Ndebele's call to lower the speed limit won't be effective in bringing down the road death toll. The minister plans to table a proposal before Cabinet next month to have the limit reduced from 120 to 100 kilometers an hour. While Ndebele believes this is the best way to decrease road fatalities, some experts say more research must be done before it's implemented.
Over 1,000 people are killed on the country's roads every month. It's accidents involving public transport vehicles that account for the majority of the statistics, as well as pedestrians. The Transport Minister believes the best way to reduce the death toll is to cut the speed limit from 120 kilometers per hour to 100 kilometers per hour.
Speed kills. We have got a better chance of stopping a vehicle at a lower speed than when we are driving at 120.
The minister is using Australia and New Zealand to show the effectiveness of lower speed limits. Both countries have speed limits of 110 kilometers per hour, and their road fatalities are significantly lower than ours. But these countries also have significantly smaller populations than South Africa, and there's better compliance from motorists.
The issue of reducing a national speed limit should be done on the basis of sound scientific research. And if we look at what the South African psyche is, I don't think the South African motoring public will take to this very kindly.
Others believe instead of making changes, more attention should be placed on enforcing the current legislation.
The Transport Department needs to come down heavily on the traffic law enforcement authorities and tell them, do your jobs.
These signs could soon be a thing of the past if Cabinet decides to back Transport Minister Sibusiso Ndebele and reduce the speed limit to 100 kilometers per hour. But experts agree that ultimately the responsibility of creating safer roads lies with motorists who should be driving more carefully. Kathy Mutlatlana, E-News, Johannesburg.
Now, one of the opinions that you heard in that report was Zahar Dembowski from the NGO Justice Project South Africa. He's the national chairperson, and he joins us now on Newsnight. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us. There's been widespread criticism of the idea, and before we talk about it, surely the intention of the minister has got to be welcomed.
Certainly, if you look from a certain perspective, the slower that you're going, the less significant the crash. However, to turn around and say that speed is the root cause of crashes is an inaccurate statement. That's the first thing. And secondly, we need to remember where this is coming from.
It's a major contributing cause.
It's a major contributing cause to the seriousness of the event of the crash, yes. However, you cannot attribute it to the root cause. The root causes are things like, for example, inattention, people who drive under fatigue, people who overtake on solid white lines, people who overtake on blind risers, etc., etc. There are a number of different moving violations that cause these kind of crashes.
But surely if we're going slower, it is going to make a positive contribution. It seems to have worked in Australia and New Zealand.
Well, what's worked in Australia and New Zealand is proper law enforcement. Unfortunately, it doesn't work in South Africa for the pure and simple reason that if we have a look at the mix of camera type of enforcement and physical enforcement. In South Africa, it's 99% camera enforcement and 1% physical enforcement. If we look at Australia, it's the exact opposite way around, and that is the big difference. Comparing South Africa to Australia is a little bit of a foolish thing to do because, first off, we have a different culture of people there who have come to respect the law, which we don't have in South Africa, and we have professional law enforcers who actually enforce moving violation type of violations.
No one's disagreeing with you that the law enforcement doesn't need to be improved radically in this country, but surely we need a multi-pronged approach here. We need to use every single piece of ammunition in the armory, and Absolutely. One of those is reducing the speed limit.
Well, yes and no, and I'll tell you why. We've given examples. If you have two vehicles traveling at 60 kilometers an hour and they drive head-on into one another, the people in both of those vehicles will most likely die because the impact is 120 kilometers an hour. So what are we going to do? Reduce the speed limits to 10 kilometers an hour? Because, you know, we're not going to be left with much choice. What we have to have is a
driving a little
holistic...
slower make you more cognizant of your surroundings?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you look at me, for example, I drive significantly under the speed limit. It irritates the living daylights out of other people, but I do drive under the speed limit. But at the end of the day, what's important is people need to upgrade their skills, they need to upgrade their attitudes, but we have to have a holistic approach to this. Law enforcement is part of that. There are 4 E's to road traffic safety, which are education, enforcement, engineering, and evaluation. And unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have any of those in place.
The point I'm trying to make is, if we need this multi-pronged approach, and we need to do everything we can, because it really is spinning out of control now, don't we need to try everything, and one of those things is reducing the speed limit?
I don't think that it's as simple as that, and I'll tell you why. Part of the outrage that's coming out of this is the amount of people who are dying in public transport crashes. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but public transport vehicles like your taxis and your buses are already limited to 100 kilometers an hour, as with heavy articulated vehicles, 80 kilometers an hour. But how many of them are actually abiding by those speed limits? We need to enforce that. Okay. Yes, we can reduce the speed limit for ordinary light motor vehicles on our freeways from 120 to 100, but how is that going to impact if we don't enforce it properly?
Enforcement is important. How then do you force compliance into the national consciousness? Is there a quick fix there?
I don't think that there's a quick fix at all.
So in other words, we can't win this war?
No, absolutely incorrect. We need to revert to the old ways of dealing with speed offences. We need to stop speedsters there and then, because it has a significant impact on their driving habits going forward. If a person is travelling at 180 kilometres an hour on the freeway and you stop him and you fine him, okay, which you wouldn't, you'd actually arrest him in that particular instance. But you have therefore prevented a possible fatality further down the road. If you're sitting taking photographs, you're not preventing anything at all. All you're doing is taking photographs. It's as simple as that. We need to look at proper physical enforcement. We need to look at education. There is no education in this country. People don't realize what the consequences of driving too fast are.
I sense this debate has got a long way to run, and thanks for your input. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us. Howard Dembowski with us here on News 90s from the NGO Justice Project South Africa.